Welcome back, viewers, and thank you for staying with us. Jazakumullah khairan. So we were discussing that Baba Fariduddin Ganj Shakar, a great Sufi, a great saint of subcontinent India, was asked by a lady to give advice to the son of that lady because the son used to eat a lot of sugar. So the Shaykh said, please come back next week and then I will tell your son, give the nasiha. So next week the lady came with the son, and then the Shaykh spoke to that child and said, oh my son, avoid eating a lot of sugar. When the Shaykh said this, and this is only what he said, the lady was surprised, and she said, Shaykh, if you were only going to say this, oh my son, avoid eating sugar, why didn't you do this last week? Why did I have to go back home and then come back specially for you only to say this? You could have given this piece of advice to my son last week. The Shaykh replied, and he said that, oh my sister, the thing is that last week my own situation was this, that I used to eat a lot of things which contain sugar. So I could not have advised him before putting that into practice myself. So I wanted to make sure before advising your son, I myself avoid eating such things. So for a whole week I practiced on this. For a whole week I avoided eating things which had sugar in them. So what happened now, since I am practicing myself, now I told, and since I am now telling your son, it will also have an effect on your son and he will follow the piece of advice. My dear viewers, this is what Imam Shafi'i said, I learned from the Sufis how to speak, which means before they speak, they make sure that they also practice on whatever they are teaching. Nowadays we find many people, many so-called scholars, many people of qal, but we find less people of hal. We find a lot of people who give da'wah, who give speeches and give talks, but there are very few people today who also put that into practice. And then the second thing he said, how to treat people with a soft heart. Imam Shafi'i says that I taught from the Sufis how to treat other human beings with love, with affection. And then he says, وَالْإِقْتَدَى بِطَرِيقِ أَهْلُ التَّصَوُّفِ. And also these people of tasawwuf, they taught me the various different tariqas, various different methods of tasawwuf, of Sufism. The same Imam Shafi, my dear viewers, he said very beautiful poetry about tasawwuf, about the people of tasawwuf, about the importance and significance of tasawwuf by saying and writing, faqihan wa sufiyan fakun laysa wahidan, faqihan wa sufiyan fakun laysa wahidan, fa inni wa haqqillahi iyyaka ansahu. He says, oh my son, be both jurist and a person of tasawwuf, be both a jurist and a Sufi. فَكُنْ لَيْسَ وَاحِدًا. Never just be one of them. Never be just a Sufi or just a jurist. Be both of them. فَإِنِّي وَحَقِّ اللَّهِ إِيَّاكَ أَنْصَحُ. And by the right of Allah which Allah has given me, I am giving you this sincere piece of advice. And then he says the reason why not to become just one, why to become both, he says فَذَلِكَ قَاسٍ لَمْ يَزُقْ قَلْبُهُ تُقًا. He says because the first one, the jurist, if you become only a jurist, then your heart will be hardened, you will have a hard heart, and you will have arrogance, you will have pride, and قَلْبُهُ تُقًا, your qalb, your heart will not contain taqwa, God-fearness and God consciousness. And he says وَهَذَا جَهُولٌ كَيْفَ ذُو الْجَهْلِ يَصْلُحُ. And he says if you only become a person of Sufi, then you will be a person who will not be a jurist. So if you only become a Sufi and not a jurist, you will have not education, you will have no education, no knowledge of ilmul ahkam, so you will remain an ignorant. And what benefit can an ignorant give to other people? So Imam Shafi here is saying that a true Sufi is the one who combines both, who combines the law of Islam, ilmul ahkam, as well who practices on tasawwuf, practices on Sufism. And then he gives this advice to his son by saying, oh my son, just don't become just a jurist. As many people today, many people are just jurists, many people are just scholars, but there are very few those who are scholars and at the same time who are Sufis, who are alim bil amal. Now then, the same Imam Shafi radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he used to also sit in the gatherings of the Sufis and saints. Now let us discuss, we have discussed the Aimma of fiqh, we have discussed the great classical Imams of jurisprudence. Let us discuss now the great jurists, the great Imams of hadith. The first one, as we discussed before, actually was Imam Abdullah bin Mubarak. We have discussed him. And Imam Bukhari, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, Imam Bukhari, as I said in the second or third episode, that tasawwuf in fact is the third discipline of Islam, along with faith, along with ibadat, with worshipping. Ihsan, tasawwuf is also a discipline. That is why, my dear brothers and sisters, my dear viewers, Imam Bukhari, when he compiled his Jami' as-Sahih al-Bukhari, he had various chapters. Among those chapters, he has chapters on Iman, he has chapters on Ibadat, on Hajj, on Sawm, etc., etc., on Aqidah, on belief. But at the same time, the same Imam, he has a chapter in the book of Bukhari on Kitab al-Raqa'iq wal-Wara. Kitab al-Raqa'iq wal-Wara. He has a chapter only on tasawwuf and Sufism. Now let us discuss Imam An-Nawawi, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi. Imam An-Nawawi, famous author of Riyaz al-Salihin, famous Shafi'i jurist, he was referred to by another Imam, Imam Sakhawi, who wrote a biography on Imam Nawawi. He was referred as Shaykh al-Islam, Qutb al-Awliya, Faiz al-An'am. He was referred by Imam Sakhawi as Shaykh al-Islam and Qutb al-Awliya, the leader of the saints. This Imam, he wrote a book, Al-Maqasid fi al-Tawheed wal-Ibada wa Asul al-Tasawwuf. He wrote a book on Al-Maqasid fi al-Tawheed wal-Ibada wa Asul al-Tasawwuf. On three disciplines of Islam, he wrote one book. Which book? The book which is known as the purpose of the oneness of Almighty Allah, belief and worship, and Tasawwuf, science of self-purification. So Imam Shafi rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, who wrote the book Al-Maqasid fi al-Tawheed wal-Ibada wa Asul al-Tasawwuf, the purpose of the oneness of Almighty Allah, the belief and worship and Tasawwuf. He writes, for example, this is just to give you a taste of the book. He writes, the way of the Sufis are five. First of all, keep presence of Allah in your heart, in public and in private. He says this is what Sufis do, to keep the presence of Allah in their heart, whether they are living alone or whether they are in the company of people, whether they are in private life or whether they are in public life. And then to follow sunnah by actions and speech. Thirdly, keep away from people and from asking them. He says the people of Tasawwuf are those who have taught me and who teach to keep away from people, which means to keep away from worldly people and from asking people, and to be happy with what Allah gave you. This is what Tasawwuf is about, to be happy, to be thankful to Allah for whatever He has given you, and to always refer to other with matters, to important matters, to Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This Imam Shafi rahmatullahi alayhi, Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, dear viewers, he died before, he passed away before he compiled one of his very famous books, which he was writing on Bustanul Arifin fi Zuhud wa Tasawwuf. He wrote a book, and he was writing a book on the gardens of Gnostics and self-purification, in which he compiled various different quotes of great saints and Sufis who lived before him. So he was compiling a book with all those quotations of those Sufis and saints in the book Bustanul Arifin fi Zuhud wa Tasawwuf. But the Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, he could not complete this book. So my dear viewers, we have discussed Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, Sahib Riyaz al-Salihin. Now let us come and discuss Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, because many people who follow Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, they claim and they say that Tasawwuf is an innovation, is a bid'ah. These people, they should know what Imam Ibn Taymiyyah has said in Majma' Fatawa Ibn Taymiyyah Al-Kubra, in volume 11, the book of Tasawwuf, Kitab al-Tasawwuf. He says, Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, some people criticized Sufiya and Tasawwuf, and they said they were innovators out of the Sunnah. But the truth is in that they are striving in Allah's obedience. He says that the truth is that the people of Tasawwuf are striving in Allah's obedience. They are mujtahideen fi ata'atillah. And Imam Ibn Taymiyyah then said, the miracles of saints are absolutely true and correct by accepting, and they are accepted by all Muslim scholars. So Imam Ibn Taymiyyah has actually praised the Sufiya. He has praised Ahlul Tasawwuf. Now Imam Ibn Qayyim, for example, Imam Ibn Qayyim, who is a student of Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, he says in Manazil as-Sa'irin. He says we can witness the greatness of the people of Sufism in the eyes of the earliest generations of Muslims by what has been mentioned by Sufyan as-Sawri. By Sufyan as-Sawri, one of the greatest Imams of the 2nd century and one of the foremost legal scholars. So this Imam Ibn Qayyim, who is a student rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi of Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, he himself has praised Imam Sufyan Sawri, and he has recognized Imam Sufyan Sawri not only as a legal scholar, as an authority on Islamic law, as a jurist, but also he has recognized Imam Sufyan Sawri as a Sufi, as a Ahl Tasawwuf, as a person who is a Sufi and a saint of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My dear viewers, Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, Imam Ibn Qayyim, all these scholars, and in fact Imam Ibn Abidin, for example, he says in Risail al-Abidin, he says the seekers in this Sufi way don't hear except from the divine presence, and they don't love any but him. He says the people who are seekers of tasawwuf, their characteristic is they do not to love anyone except Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says then the Sufis are those, if they remember Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they cry, they shed tears, and if they thank him, they are happy. May Allah bless them. This is the dua of Imam Ibn Abidin. So you see, the classical Imams, those who we always refer to, those who we always see as an authority on either Islamic law, Islamic jurisprudence, as a jurist, or those who we see as an authority, as a muhaddis, as an Imam of hadith. You see all of these various scholars, Imams, Aimmas, which I have mentioned, Aimma of Hadith, Aimma of Fiqh, Aimma of Ahkamat, they all have recognized tasawwuf and have praised tasawwuf. In fact, many of them, they were Sufis. They used to follow tasawwuf, they used to follow tariqas. So to say that tasawwuf, the science of tasawwuf, is something which is an innovation, was important from other civilizations, from other cultures, then we must also realize that indirectly we are objecting also on these Imams, since they have praised Sufism, since they were followers of Sufism, since they used to follow the path of tasawwuf, then in fact everything which is associated to these Imams, to Imam Nawawi, to Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, Imam Qayyim, to Imam Abidin, to Mullah Ali Qari, to Imam Bukhari, to Imam Muslim, to Imam Tirmizi, to Imam Abdullah bin Mubarak, to Imam Abu Azam Abu Hanifa, to Imam Malik, to Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, to Imam Shafi, to all various Imams, then everything would be an innovation, everything would be a bid'ah. But no, these are not bid'ahs, these are not innovations. In fact, they have their tradition from the Quran and from the Sunnah. So bihamdillahi ta'ala, by the grace of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have discussed today and completed our topic, the tasawwuf in the light of the classical Imams. Inshallah, in the next episode, you can expect that we will discuss the attributes and the characteristics of the Sufiya and Ahlullah and the virtues of the Ahlullah, inshallah. Until then, take care of yourself and do dua for me, for yourself, your relatives, family members, and for the whole Ummah, for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and of course for Ummah Channel.